Billionaire doesn't know what to do when her daughter calls the poor janitor dad. Before anything else, if this video finds you well, wherever you are, let me know how it made you feel at the end. The morning rain pelted against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan penthouse as Catherine Morrison stood frozen in the marble foyer, her designer heels clicking nervously against the pristine white stone. At 34, she possessed the kind of beauty that Grace magazine covers platinum blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, emerald eyes that once sparkled with ambition. Now dulled by a year of grief, the black Chanel suit she wore cost more than most people's monthly salary, yet it felt like a costume she could no longer recognize as her own. Mrs. Morrison, the gentle voice belonged to Maria Santos, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for 8 years. "Little Emma is asking for you again." Catherine's breath caught. Emma, her 7-year-old daughter with Richard's piercing blue eyes and stubborn chin, the only light left in her darkened world since Richard's death from pancreatic cancer. 13 months ago, the fortune left behind $3 billion built from tech investments and real estate meant nothing when she watched her daughter cry herself to sleep, calling for a daddy who would never come home. "Tell her I'll be there in a moment," Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm outside through the rain-streaked glass. She watched a figure emerge from the service elevator. James Mitchell, the building's maintenance supervisor, carried his toolkit with the same quiet dignity he brought to everything. At 31, he possessed an understated handsomeness, dark hair perpetually tousled from work, kind brown eyes that seemed to see straight through her wealth to the broken woman beneath, and calloused hands that spoke of honest labor. His worn jeans and simple navy t-shirt were a stark contrast to her world of silk and diamonds. Catherine had barely noticed him before, just another employee in the building's vast network of staff. But lately, she'd found herself watching him work the gentle way he fixed Emma's broken dollhouse. How he always smiled when their paths crossed in the hallway, never treating her with the mixture of awe and pity that others showed the grieving billionaire. "Widow, Mommy." Emma's voice echoed through the penthouse as small feet thundered across the hardwood floors. The little girl appeared in the foyer wearing her favorite purple dress, dark curls bouncing with each step. "James is here. He's going to fix the broken sink in the kitchen." "That's nice, sweetheart," Catherine replied automatically. But her daughter's next word stopped her cold. "Can I help him, Daddy James?" The world tilted. Catherine's hand flew to her throat, her wedding ring of 15-carat diamonds she'd never removed suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Through the haze of shock, she heard James's gentle voice responding to Emma. "Well, little princess, we'd better ask your mom first." But Emma had already grabbed his work-worn hand, pulling him toward the kitchen with the innocent trust only children possess. "Come on, Daddy James. Mommy won't mind." Catherine stood paralyzed, watching her daughter treat the stranger with the familiarity of family. When had this happened? How long had Emma been calling him that name? 3 hours later, Catherine sat in her home office, unable to focus on the quarterly reports spread across her mahogany desk. The sound of laughter drifted from the kitchen, Emma's high-pitched giggles, mixing with James's deeper chuckles. It was the most joy she'd heard from her daughter since Richard's funeral. Through security cameras she'd never bothered to monitor before, she watched them work together. James patiently explained each tool while Emma handed him screws and washers, her small face serious with concentration, the way he spoke to her like she mattered, like her questions were important. Reminded Catherine painfully of Richard. "Mrs. Morrison," Maria appeared in the doorway, her expression troubled. "May I speak with you?" "Of course." Catherine minimized the security feed, feeling oddly guilty for watching. Maria closed the door softly behind her. At 52, the housekeeper had raised 6 children of her own and possessed an intuition about family dynamics that Catherine had come to trust implicitly. "It's about Emma and Mr. Mitchell," Maria began carefully. "She's been calling him that name for about 3 months now. It started after he helped her when she fell and scraped her knee by the playground downstairs." Catherine's throat tightened. 3 months? Why didn't you tell me? You were in Switzerland for the board meetings, remember? Then London for the acquisition talks. Emma was so sad when you left, and Maria paused, choosing her words carefully. "He has a way of making her smile. I thought you should know before." "Before what?" "Before she gets more attached than she already is." The weight of Maria's words settled over Catherine like a blanket of ice. In her grief and desperate attempts to maintain Richard's business empire, she'd missed the most important thing happening in her own home. Her daughter had found a father figure, In the building maintenance man. What do you know about him? Catherine asked, her business instincts kicking in despite her emotional turmoil. James Mitchell, 31 years old, works 2 jobs here and at a construction company on weekends. Sends most of his money to his mother in Ohio for her medical treatments. Never married. No children of his own. The other staff speak highly of him. Catherine nodded, filing away each detail. And Emma, how often do they interact? Daily, when she's home from school. He always finds small projects near the penthouse. The other day, I found them in the library. He was reading to her something about brave princesses and kind dragons, the familiar ache of. Loss mixed with something Catherine couldn't identify. Gratitude, fear, what kind of medical treatments? His mother has diabetes complications. From what I understand, the treatments are expensive, and she doesn't have adequate insurance. More pieces of the puzzle. Catherine knew about financial desperation, though from the other side, she'd grown up wealthy, married wealthy, never questioned where the next meal would come from. But she recognized devotion when she saw it. A man who worked himself to exhaustion for his mother's health care. Wasn't someone looking for an easy target. Mrs. Morrison, Maria continued gently. Emma asks about him constantly when he's not here. She draws him pictures, saves her favorite cookies for him. Yesterday, she told me she wished he was her real daddy because he never has to go away like Daddy Richard did. Catherine's carefully constructed composure cracked. She pressed her fingers to her temples, fighting back tears that had become all too familiar. What am I supposed to do with this information, Maria? I don't know, the housekeeper admitted, but ignoring it won't make it go away. That evening, Catherine found herself pacing the length of her bedroom suite, a glass of untouched wine in her hand. The penthouse felt enormous and empty despite its $50 million worth of furnishings. Emma was finally asleep after an hour of bedtime stories. She'd insisted on telling Catherine about Daddy James and how he'd taught her to identify different types of screws. The rational part of her mind cataloged the problems: inappropriate attachment, security concerns, the vast gulf between their social positions. The board of Morrison Industries would have a collective heart attack if they discovered their CEO's daughter was calling the maintenance man daddy. But the mother in her, the part that had watched Emma withdraw into herself over the past year, couldn't ignore what Maria had said. For the first time since Richard's death, Emma was truly happy. She was engaging with an adult male figure without the fear and sadness that now accompanied mentions of her father. Catherine walked to the window overlooking Central Park. Somewhere in this city, James Mitchell was probably in a small apartment, maybe calling his mother to check on her health, counting dollars to make sure he could cover her next treatment. The contrast with her life of endless privilege felt stark and somehow shameful. Her phone buzzed a text from her sister Alexandra in Los Angeles. How's my favorite niece? And how are you holding up? Catherine stared at the screen. How could she explain that her daughter was calling a stranger daddy while she, the mother, felt like she was drowning in her own grief and responsibilities? We're managing, she typed back, then deleted it. Started over. Emma's doing better. Also deleted. Finally, it's complicated. Alexandra's response came quickly. Want to talk? Catherine almost said yes. Alexandra was the only person who might understand she'd lost her husband in a car accident 5 years ago, though she'd had no children to consider. But how could she explain this situation without sounding either paranoid or negligent? Maybe tomorrow, she replied, setting the phone aside. Catherine made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Tomorrow, she would observe James Mitchell more carefully, not through security cameras like some voyeur, but face to face. She needed to understand what her daughter saw in him. What drew Emma to call him by the most sacred name in her young vocabulary? If he was taking advantage of a lonely child and a grieving widow, she would end it immediately, regardless of Emma's tears. But if he was genuinely caring for her daughter out of simple human kindness, Catherine didn't allow herself to finish that thought. The possibilities were too dangerous. The implications too complex for a woman who'd built her life on control and predictability. But as she finally drifted off to sleep in a king-size bed that still felt too large, she dreamed not of Richard or board meetings or quarterly projections, but of kind brown eyes and gentle laughter echoing through her empty home. The next morning arrived with autumn's first real chill, and Catherine found herself lingering over coffee in the kitchen. Instead of rushing off to her usual breakfast meeting, she canceled 3 appointments, claiming she needed to work from home, a half-truth that felt foreign on her tongue. Emma sat at the marble breakfast bar, swinging her legs and chattering about school while Maria prepared her lunch. Catherine watched her daughter's face, noting how it lit up every time footsteps echoed in the hallway, how her head turned hopefully toward every sound. Is James coming today? Emma asked for the third time in 10 minutes. I'm not sure, sweetheart, Catherine replied, though she knew from the building's schedule that he was due to inspect the fixed systems on their floor. He promised to show me how the big fans work. Emma continued, spreading strawberry jam on her toast with the intensity of a master artist. He says understanding how things work makes them less scary. Catherine's breath caught. It was something Richard used to say, that knowledge conquered fear. Had she mentioned that to James somehow? Or was it just coincidence? Emma, she began carefully, you know that James is our building's maintenance supervisor, right? He takes care of the building for everyone who lives here. Emma nodded solemnly. But he takes special care of us. He told me so. What exactly did he tell you? That we're special to him because we're brave ladies who take care of each other. Emma's eyes, so much like Richard's, fixed on her mother with startling intensity. He says Daddy Richard was lucky to have such strong girls, and now it's his job to help take care of us too. Catherine's coffee cup rattled against its saucer. James had talked about Richard? How much did this man know about their family, their loss? When did he say this to you? Last week, when I was crying because I missed Daddy. James hugged me and said it was okay to be sad, but that Daddy Richard wouldn't want me to be scared. He said sometimes people come into our lives to help us remember how to be happy again. The doorbell chimed, interrupting Catherine's swirling thoughts. Through the intercom, James's voice was professional but warm. Good morning, Mrs. Morrison. I'm here for the scheduled HVAC inspection, Emma squealed with delight, sliding off her stool. Daddy James. Before Catherine could react, her daughter was running toward the door. She followed, her heart pounding with an emotion she couldn't name, dread mixed with something dangerously close to anticipation. James stood in the foyer in his usual work clothes, toolkit in hand, but Catherine saw him differently now. The way he automatically crouched to Emma's level as she threw her arms around his neck, how his face softened with genuine affection, the careful respect in his eyes when he looked up at Catherine. Good morning, Mrs. Morrison. His voice was steady, professional. I hope it's all right that I'm here early. The building manager asked me to prioritize your floor because of the complaints from 4B about temperature fluctuations. Of course, she managed to keep her voice level despite the chaos in her chest. Emma, let James work. You need to finish your breakfast before school, but he promised to show me after school. James interjected gently, standing to his full height. Your mom's right. Education first, then fun. That's what smart princesses do. Emma beamed at him before skipping back toward the kitchen, leaving Catherine alone with the man who'd somehow become the most important person in her daughter's world without her even noticing. Mr. Mitchell, she began, then stopped. What was she supposed to say? Thank you for making my daughter happy. Stop being kind to my child. Explain why you're calling yourself her daddy. He seemed to sense her struggle. Mrs. Morrison, if you have concerns about my interactions with Emma, I completely understand. I know the situation might seem unusual. She repeated the word, testing its weight. That's one way to put it. I want you to know that I would never do anything to harm or confuse her. She's a remarkable little girl, and she's been through enough upheaval. His brown eyes met hers directly. No deference or apology in them, but if my presence makes you uncomfortable, I can request that other maintenance staff handle your floor. The offer surprised her. Most people in his position would cling to any connection with her wealth and influence, but James was offering to remove himself from the equation entirely, putting Emma's well-being and her comfort above whatever benefit he might gain. That won't be necessary, she heard herself saying, but I think we should talk. 2 hours later, Catherine sat across from James in her private study, feeling more nervous than she had in any boardroom negotiation. Emma had left for school with her usual cheerful goodbye kiss, and the penthouse felt oddly quiet without her daughter's chatter filling the spaces between them. James had completed his HVAC inspection with quiet efficiency, but accepted her invitation to talk with a gravity that suggested he'd been expecting this conversation. Now, with coffee growing cold between them, Catherine struggled to find the right words. Emma calls. You, Daddy, she said finally, deciding on directness. I know. His response was simple, without deflection or excuse. How long has this been going on? About 3 months. It started after she fell by the playground. She scraped her knee pretty badly, and I helped clean it up. She was crying for her father, and He paused, running a hand through his dark hair. I held her until she stopped shaking. When she looked up at me, she said, "Thank you, Daddy James." I should have corrected her immediately. "Why didn't you?" James was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on his hands. Because she stopped crying. Because for the first time in weeks, according to Maria. She smiled. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Because I lost my own father when I was 7, and I remembered what it felt like to desperately want someone to fill that hole. The admission hit Catherine like a physical blow. She'd expected opportunism, manipulation, perhaps even inappropriate intentions. She hadn't expected raw honesty about childhood grief that mirrored her daughter's experience. "Tell me about your father. Heart attack, sudden, like your husband's cancer diagnosis." I imagine. One day he was teaching me to throw a baseball. The next day he was gone. James's voice remained steady, but Catherine caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I spent most afternoons alone, wishing for someone, anyone, to care about my scraped knees and homework troubles. And now you're that someone for Emma." "I don't want to overstep," he said carefully. "But when she looks at me like I can fix the world just by showing up, I can't bring myself to disappoint her, not when she's already lost so much." Catherine studied his face, looking for signs of deception. In business, she learned to read people quickly, to spot the tells that revealed hidden agendas. But James's expression held nothing but honest concern, and something that looked disturbingly like love, not romantic love, but the fierce protectiveness of someone who claimed Emma as his own. "She draws pictures of you," Catherine said softly. "Did you know that? She has a whole collection in her room. You and her, building things together, reading stories. In some of them, all 3 of us are standing together like a family." "Mrs. Morrison, Catherine," she interrupted, surprising herself. "If we're going to discuss my daughter's emotional well-being, I think we've moved past formalities." "Catherine." The way he said her name sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "I need you to know that I have never, would never, encourage Emma to think of me as a replacement for her father. Richard Morrison was by all accounts an extraordinary man who loved his family deeply. I'm just someone who cares about Emma's happiness." "Who's Richard Morrison to you? What do you know about my husband?" James's expression grew carefully neutral. "I know he built Morrison Industries from nothing. I know he was brilliant and generous and died far too young. I know Emma misses him desperately, and I know you're carrying a weight that would crush most people." "That doesn't answer my question." He was quiet for so long that Catherine thought he wouldn't respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I know he was the kind of father I wished I'd had, the kind of husband I hope to be someday. If I'm ever lucky enough to find someone who could love me despite everything I can offer." His eyes met hers again. "And I know that losing him nearly destroyed the 2 most important people in my world." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to build. That evening, Catherine stood in Emma's doorway watching her daughter sleep, still processing the afternoon's revelations. The little girl clutched a stuffed elephant, a gift from James, after she'd mentioned liking them, and even in sleep, her face held a contentment Catherine hadn't seen since before Richard's diagnosis. "She's beautiful," a quiet voice said behind her. Catherine turned to find James in the hallway, toolkit in hand. "What are you doing here? Your shift ended hours ago." Emergency call from 1-A, broken pipe flooding their bathroom. He set down his tools carefully, mindful of the sleeping child. "I didn't expect to see you still awake. I've been thinking about our conversation." And Catherine closed Emma's door softly and walked toward the living room, James following at a respectful distance. The space felt different with him, and it less like a museum of her former life, more like a home where real people lived and cared for each other. "I've been thinking about what you said about Emma being one of the most important people in your world." She turned to face him, arms crossed defensively. "That's a significant statement from someone who barely knows us. I know Emma lights up when she sees me coming. I know she saves her best drawings to show me. I know she asks me questions about everything from why the sky is blue to whether her daddy can see her from heaven." His voice grew softer. "I know she trusts me completely, and that terrifies and honors me in equal measure. And what about me?" The question slipped out before Catherine could stop it. "Am I also one of the most important people in your world?" James's expression grew unreadable. "Catherine, it's a fair question. You spend time with my daughter in my home. You've seen me at my worst, grieving, struggling, barely holding everything together. If Emma matters to you, then presumably her well-being matters to you, which means you matter to me more than you should," he interrupted quietly. "More than is appropriate for a building maintenance supervisor to feel about a billionaire widow. More than is safe for either of us." The admission hung in the air between them like a dare. Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs as she processed what he'd just revealed. In the past year, dozens of men had pursued her, board members, business associates, old family friends who saw her grief as an opening. None had affected her the way James did, simply by being honest. "This is complicated," she whispered. "It doesn't have to be." James stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "I'm not asking for anything from you. I'm not positioning myself for some grand romantic gesture or trying to win the lottery by charming the lonely widow. I'm just a man who cares deeply about a little girl who calls me daddy, and her mother who's doing the impossible job of holding the world together while her heart breaks. James, I know what people would think. I know the assumptions they make about my motives. Hell, I'd probably make the same assumptions if I were looking at this from the outside." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "But Emma has become like my own daughter, and you become the woman I think about when I'm trying to fall asleep at night. The woman I want to protect from every board meeting that makes you cry, every anniversary that brings back the pain. The woman I have absolutely no right to love." The word hit Catherine like lightning. Love, not want, not desire, not the calculated interest she'd grown used to from men who saw her fortune before her face. Love. "You can't love me," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You don't even know me. I know you work 18-hour days to honor your husband's legacy. I know you cry in your office sometimes when you think no one can see. I know you give up every penny of your fortune if it would bring Richard back for Emma's sake. I know you're stronger than you believe and more beautiful than you realize." He reached up, almost touching her cheek before dropping his hand. "I know loving you is probably the most foolish thing I've ever done, but I can't seem to stop." Catherine stared at him, her carefully constructed walls crumbling with every word. This wasn't how her life was supposed to go. She was supposed to mourn Richard appropriately, raise Emma with dignity, and maybe, eventually, find someone suitable from her own social circle to provide stability and companionship. She wasn't supposed to fall for the maintenance man who'd stolen her daughter's heart, was now reaching for her own. "This is impossible," she breathed. "I know. The board, the media, the difference in our... I know. Emma's already too attached. If this goes wrong, I know." James stepped back, giving her space to breathe. "I know all of it, Catherine. Every reason why this can't work. Every way it could destroy all of us. But I also know that for the first time in over a year, both you and Emma are smiling again." He was right. Despite the impossibility, despite the complications that would arise, despite the vast gulf between their worlds, Catherine felt more alive than she had since Richard's death. The question was whether feeling alive was worth the risk of losing everything she'd built to protect herself and Emma. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As James gathered his tools and headed for the service elevator, Catherine remained in the living room, staring out at the city lights and wondering if she was brave enough to let herself love again, and if she was strong enough to love a man the world would never understand her choosing. 3 weeks passed in a haze of careful avoidance and stolen glances. Catherine threw herself into merger negotiations with a Japanese tech firm, spending 16-hour days in conference rooms to avoid the questions burning in her heart. But every evening, she found herself listening for James's voice echoing through the penthouse as he helped Emma with various projects, fixing her bicycle, teaching her about electrical circuits, reading bedtime stories when Catherine worked late. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. In late October, Catherine returned from London to find Emma sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face as she struggled with second-grade math homework. "I don't understand," Emma wailed, crumpling another worksheet. "Why can't numbers just behave? Let me help you." "Sweetheart," Catherine began, but Emma shook her head violently. "You'll just get frustrated like last time. I want Daddy James. He explains things so I can understand." The words cut deeper than any boardroom criticism Catherine had ever received. She was failing at the most basic level, being the mother Emma needed. Before she could respond, the doorbell chimed. "That's him." Emma brightened instantly, racing toward the door. Catherine followed slowly, Finding James in the foyer still in his work clothes, concern etched across his features. Maria called. He explained quietly. She said Emma was upset about homework. I hope it's okay that I came. Watching her daughter's face transform from despair to joy at his arrival, Catherine made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Emma needs help with math, she said simply. I have calls to return. Would you mind? James's eyes searched her face, looking for the trap, the test, the hidden agenda. Finding none, he nodded. Of course. For the next hour, Catherine sat in her office with the door cracked open, listening to James's patient voice explaining fractions using pizza slices and M and Ms. Emma's delighted laughter filled spaces that had been silent for too long. When Catherine finally emerged, she found them at the kitchen table, Emma's homework completed and both of them working on a jigsaw puzzle of the solar system. Daddy James says, Jupiter has 6 to 7 moons, Emma announced proudly, and that scientists are finding new ones all the time. That's fascinating, Catherine replied, her voice catching slightly on the word daddy that now seemed as natural as breathing. James began gathering his things. I should let you to have dinner. Stay. Catherine heard herself saying, please, Emma's. Right, you do explain things better than I do. The smile that spread across James's face was worth every risk, every complication, every whispered conversation the board would never understand. That night, as the three of them shared takeout Chinese food and Emma chattered about school and friends, and the butterfly garden she wanted to plant in spring, Catherine felt something she'd thought was buried with Richard, the warm contentment of family. Dinner around a table where everyone belonged. The first snow of winter arrived in mid-November, blanketing Central Park in pristine white that made Emma squeal with delight. Catherine stood at the kitchen window watching her daughter and James build a snowman on the penthouse's private terrace, their breath creating small clouds in the frigid air. He's good with her, Maria observed, joining Catherine at the window with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. Too good, Catherine murmured, accepting the warmth gratefully. The board is starting to ask questions about why I'm working from home more often, and what do. You tell them that I'm spending more time with Emma, which isn't a lie. Catherine sipped her chocolate, watching James lift Emma onto his shoulders so she could place a carrot nose on their creation. But it's not the whole truth either. The whole truth was that Catherine Morrison, CEO of a $3 billion empire, was falling hopelessly in love with a man who owned nothing but an old pickup truck and a heart large enough to embrace a broken family. The whole truth was that she looked forward to his arrival each day more than any board meeting or business triumph. The whole truth was that she'd started finding excuses to be in whatever room he was working in, just to hear his quiet humming or catch glimpses of his rare, devastating smile. Mrs. Morrison, Maria said carefully, forgive me for speaking plainly, but you're happier than you've been since Mr. Richard passed. Emma is thriving. Whatever's happening here, it's good for both of you. Before Catherine could respond, the terrace door burst open and Emma tumbled inside, cheeks flushed pink with cold and excitement. Mommy, come see our snowman. Daddy James made him a whole snow family of Mama and Daddy and little girl. Catherine's breath caught. Through the window, she could see the 3 snow figures James had crafted with obvious carrot figure in a business suit, a shorter one in work clothes, and a small one between them, all holding hands in a circle of togetherness. He made us, Emma continued, bouncing on her toes. He said every family should be together, even if they're made of snow. James appeared in the doorway, stamping snow from his boots, his cheeks as flushed as Emma's. Sorry, I got carried away. Emma wanted to make sure everyone was represented. It's beautiful, Catherine said softly, and meant it, all of it. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep clutching the snow globe James had bought her, Catherine found him cleaning his tools in the utility room, the sight of him sleeves pushed up, dark hair falling across his forehead as he worked sent a familiar warmth through her chest. Thank you, she said from the doorway, for today, for every day, for making her laugh like that. James looked up, his brown eyes soft in the dim light. She makes it easy. Emma's remarkable, Catherine. She has your strength and her father's curiosity. Richard would be proud of the little girl she's becoming. How do you know what Richard would think? Because I see what he built, not just the company, but the family. The love he left behind it, both of you. James set down his wrench, giving her his full attention. A man who could inspire that kind of devotion must have been extraordinary. The generous way he spoke about Richard, without jealousy or resentment, broke something loose in Catherine's chest. Here was a man secure enough to honor her first love while building something new, patient enough to let her heal at her own pace. "I've been thinking about what you said," she admitted quietly, "about loving me being foolish. Catherine, maybe foolish is exactly what I need. Maybe safe and appropriate and suitable are just other words for settling." She stepped closer, close enough to see the hope blooming in his eyes. "Maybe the bravest thing I could do is choose love over logic, and have you chosen?" Instead of answering with words, Catherine rose on her tiptoes and kissed him soft, tentative. Full of promise and possibility, James's arms came around her gently, as if she were something precious that might break if held too tightly. When they broke apart, Catherine rested her forehead against his. "I'm choosing you, James Mitchell. I'm choosing us. Whatever that means, whatever it costs, it means everything to me." He whispered against her hair, "Everything." Christmas Eve arrived with the kind of perfect snowfall that belonged in movies rather than real life. The penthouse glowed with warm lights strung around every window, and a 12-foot Fraser fir dominated the living room, decorated with a mixture of priceless antique ornaments and Emma's handmade creations. Catherine stood in her walk-in closet, staring at an array of evening gowns suitable for the Morrison Industries Christmas Gala. She was supposed to attend that evening for 20 years. She'd never missed the event, first as Richard's wife, then as the grieving widow maintaining traditions. But this year felt different. "Mommy?" Emma appeared in the doorway, wearing red pajamas covered in reindeer. "Daddy James is here with presents." Catherine's heart skipped. She told James that Emma always opened one gift. On Christmas Eve, a tradition started when she was 3, that he brought presents spoke to the depth of his commitment to their unusual family. "I'll be right there, sweetheart." Instead of reaching for a gala gown, Catherine selected jeans and a soft cashmere sweater, clothes for staying home, for building memories. That mattered more than any boardroom appearance. She found James and Emma in the living room, a small pile of wrapped packages between them. James wore dark slacks and a navy button-down that made his eyes look impossibly warm. He clearly dressed up for their private Christmas celebration. "These are from Daddy James," Emma announced, bouncing beside a carefully wrapped box, "and I made him something too." "Emma," Catherine began gently, "you know we've talked about gifts, and it's not expensive." James interrupted quietly, "I made them myself." The first box contained a wooden jewelry box with Emma's name carved across the top in elegant script. The craftsmanship was exquisite, smooth joints, perfect proportions, a tiny ballerina that spun when the lid opened. "You made this," Catherine breathed, running her fingers across the flawless wood grain. "In my spare time." Emma mentioned she didn't have anywhere special to keep her treasures. The second gift made Catherine's throat tighten. A wooden dollhouse. That was an exact replica of their penthouse, complete with miniature furniture and tiny dolls that looked remarkably like the 3 of them. "Now we can all be together even when I'm at school," Emma explained, arranging the little family in the dollhouse living room. Catherine's gift to James felt inadequate by comparison. A leather toolkit with his initials embossed in gold. Expensive, but impersonal compared to the love evident in his handmade creations. But James's face lit up as if she'd given him the world. "This is beautiful, Catherine. Thank you." "I'd have something else," Emma announced importantly, producing a small wrapped package. "For both of you." Inside was a drawing Emma had clearly labored over, the 3 of them standing in front of a Christmas tree, holding hands, with the words "My Real Family" written in careful 7-year-old script across the top. "I know Daddy Richard is in heaven," Emma said seriously, "but Daddy James is here with us now. And I think Daddy Richard would want us to be happy." Catherine felt tears spilling down her cheeks as she pulled Emma into her arms, over her daughter's head. She met James's eyes and saw her own overwhelming emotion reflected there. "I think you're right, baby girl," Catherine whispered. "I think Daddy Richard would want us to be very happy." Later that evening, after Emma had finally fallen asleep clutching her new dollhouse family, Catherine and James sat by the Christmas tree sharing wine in comfortable silence. "I didn't go to the gala tonight," Catherine said eventually. "I know, Emma mentioned it earlier. She was worried you'd be sad to miss it." "I'm not sad." Catherine turned to face him fully. "For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be." James reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. "Catherine, I need you to know that whatever happens between us, I will always be here for Emma. Even if you decide this is too complicated, too risky, stop." She pressed her finger to his lips. "Stop planning for me to leave you. Stop protecting yourself from getting hurt. I'm not going anywhere." James Mitchell, The board won't understand. Your social circle, the media, will have to adjust to the fact that Catherine Morrison makes her own choices. About her own life, she shifted closer to him on the sofa. I've spent a year trying to be the perfect widow, the appropriate CEO, the right kind of mother. I'm tired of living for other people's expectations. And what do you want for yourself? Catherine looked around the room at Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator, at the dollhouse that would become Emma's most treasured possession, at the man who brought light back into their darkened world. I want this. I want us. I want to wake up every morning knowing that someone loves Emma the way Richard did. I want to fall asleep at night next to someone who chose me not for my money or my connections, but because he sees who I really am underneath all the armor. She touched his face gently. I want to love you, James, completely, publicly, permanently. Even though I'm nobody special, you're special to Emma. You're special to me. That makes you the most important person in our world. James kissed her then, deep and sure and full of promises that neither money nor status could buy. When they broke apart, Catherine saw their future stretching ahead, complicated, unconventional, but built on the only foundation that truly mattered, love that chose to stay, despite every reason to run. The first crisis hit 3 weeks later, delivered in the form of a phone call that shattered the peaceful morning routine Catherine had grown to treasure. She was watching James teach Emma to make pancakes when her phone rang with a distinctive tone. Reserved for board emergencies. Catherine, we need to talk. Immediately. Victoria Ashford's voice carried the ice that had made her the most feared woman on Wall Street. As head of the Morrison Industries board, Victoria had been Richard's mentor and Catherine's reluctant ally since his death. Good morning. To you too. Victoria, don't be glib. I'm in the lobby of your building with Harold Westbrook and David Chen. We're coming up. Catherine's blood turned to ice. Victoria never traveled with the other board members unless the situation was dire. What's this about? You know exactly what this is about. The maintenance man. Catherine, did you really think no one would notice? The line went dead. Catherine stared at her phone, her peaceful world tilting on its axis as reality crashed back in. What's wrong? James asked, immediately reading her expression. The board knows about us. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. They're on their way up. Emma looked up from her pancake batter, sensing the sudden tension. Are we in trouble? No, baby girl, Catherine said quickly, forcing a smile. Just some boring grown-up business. James, you should. I'm not leaving. His voice was quiet but firm. If we're doing this, Catherine, we do it together. 15 minutes later, Catherine faced 3 of the most powerful people in New York across her dining room table, acutely aware of James standing supportively behind her chair, and Emma's toys scattered across the living room, evidence of the life she built outside the sterile world of corporate expectations. Victoria Ashford, 72 and sharp as a blade, spoke first. Catherine, I've known you since you were 25 years old. I watched you build this company alongside Richard, and I've supported your leadership since his death. But this, she gestured vaguely toward James, this is unacceptable. My personal life is not a board matter, Catherine replied evenly. Your personal life becomes a board matter when it threatens shareholder confidence. Harold Westbrook interjected. The 68-year-old investment banker had never liked Catherine's leadership style. Do you have any idea what the media will do with this story? The grieving billionaire widow and the building maintenance man. You'll be a laughingstock. The employees are already talking, David Chen added. At 55, he usually supported Catherine's decisions, making his presence here particularly ominous. Human Resources is fielding questions about inappropriate relationships between management and service staff. Catherine felt James tense behind her, but his hand settled gently on her shoulder, a reminder that she wasn't facing this alone. James Mitchell is not a Morrison Industries employee, she said carefully. He works for the building management company. There is no conflict of interest. Don't split hairs with us, Catherine, Victoria snapped. The optics are disastrous. A woman in your position cannot be involved with someone so far beneath her social status. It damages everything Richard built. The words hit their target, and Catherine felt doubt creeping in. Was she being selfish? Was her happiness worth risking the company Richard had poured his life into building? Furthermore, Harold continued, we've done some investigating into Mr. Mitchell's background. His mother owes over $200,000 in medical debt. His own credit score is abysmal due to missed payments helping her. How convenient that he's found himself a billionaire patron. That's enough. James's voice cut through the room like a whip. Catherine turned to see him step forward, his jaw tight with controlled anger. You want to attack me? Fine. But don't you dare suggest I'm using Catherine or Emma for money, aren't you? Victoria asked coldly, a poor man suddenly surrounded by luxury, playing father to a little girl who will inherit billions. Forgive us for being skeptical of your motives. My motives? James's laugh held no humor. My motive is loving a 7-year-old girl who lost her father and needed someone to show her that the world still had safe adults in it. My motive is caring about a woman strong enough to run a Fortune 500 company, but human enough to cry when she thinks no one is watching. Catherine's heart swelled at his defense. But Victoria wasn't finished. How touching. And I suppose it's just coincidence that you positioned yourself perfectly to benefit from their grief. The reading is next month, isn't it, Catherine? Emma's trust fund becomes accessible when she turns 18, with substantial distributions available for her care and education before then. Plenty of money for a stepfather to manage. Stop. Catherine stood abruptly, rage making her voice shake. You will not speak about my daughter's inheritance in front of her. And you will not insult the man who has shown us nothing but kindness and love. Love. Harold scoffed. Catherine, please. You're a brilliant businesswoman. Surely you can see the situation objectively. I can see it perfectly clearly. Catherine moved to stand beside James, taking his hand in full view of the board. I see a man who works 2 jobs to pay for his mother's medical care. I see someone who has never asked me for anything except the chance to make Emma smile. I see the person who has brought joy back into this house after a year of grief. You see what you want to see, Victoria said sadly. Catherine, I understand you're lonely. Richard's death was devastating for all of us, but this rebound relationship is not a rebound. Catherine's voice carried the authority that has silenced hostile takeover negotiations. This is love, Victoria. Real, complicated, inconvenient love that doesn't care about stock prices or social expectations. The room fell silent except for the soft sound of Emma's humming from the kitchen, where she was presumably still working on her pancakes, blissfully unaware that her world was being dissected by people who saw only numbers and risks where she saw family. Catherine, David said gently, we're not your enemies. We're trying to protect you. Protect the company. Protect Emma's future. Then trust me to know what's best for my daughter and myself. She squeezed James's hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. I am not resigning from the board. I am not ending this relationship, and I am not living my life based on what other people might think. Victoria stood slowly, her expression unreadable. Then you leave us no choice. The board will meet tomorrow to discuss a motion of no confidence. If you persist in this relationship, we will be forced to question your judgment in all areas of leadership. The threat hung in the air like a sword. Catherine had fought hostile takeovers and survived market crashes. But losing the support of her own board, Richard's board, felt like the ultimate betrayal. Do what you feel you must, she said quietly, but know that you're not just attacking my personal choices, you're attacking the happiness of a little girl who has already lost too much. After the board members left, Catherine sank into James's arms, finally allowing herself to shake with the magnitude of what they were facing. I'm sorry, he whispered against her hair. I'm so sorry this is happening because of me. Don't apologize for loving us, she replied fiercely. Don't you dare apologize for that. But as Emma's laughter echoed from the kitchen, Catherine couldn't shake the terrifying thought that love might not be enough to protect everything she held dear. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following Friday, giving Catherine 5 days to prepare for the fight of her professional life. She spent those days in strategy sessions with her lawyers, reviewing every clause of Richard's will and the corporate bylaws that govern Morrison Industries. But it was Thursday evening that changed everything. Catherine was in her office reviewing financial projections when Emma appeared in the doorway, her small face serious with the kind of worry that should never touch a 7-year-old. Mommy, are you sending Daddy James away? Catherine's heart clenched. What makes you think that? Sweetheart, I heard you talking to Aunt Alexandra on the phone. You said the board doesn't like him. Emma climbed into Catherine's lap, her warm weight of comfort against the chaos. Are they going to make him leave like Daddy Richard had to leave? The innocent question shattered Catherine's composure. How could she explain corporate politics and social expectations to a child who saw the world in terms of love and loss? Oh, baby girl, Catherine whispered, holding Emma tight. Daddy James isn't sick like Daddy Richard was. He's not going anywhere. But what if the mean people make him? Before Catherine could answer, James appeared in the doorway, still in his work clothes, but carrying a small wrapped package. Someone sounds worried, he said gently, joining them by the window that overlooked Central Park. What's troubling my favorite princess? Emma launched into an explanation of her fears, her words tumbling over each other in her urgency to make him understand the danger. James listened with the same careful attention he gave to her. Stories about school friends and playground adventures. Emma, he said finally, do you remember what I told you about brave princesses? She nodded solemnly, that they fight for what matters. That's right. And what matters most to me and Mommy. Exactly. So if some people don't understand why I love you both, what do you think I should do? Emma considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Fight for us, always. James handed her the small package. This is for you, but I want your mom to see it too. Inside was a silver locket, simple but beautiful, with Emma's initials engraved on the front. When she opened it, Catherine gasped. On one side was a tiny photo of Richard holding baby Emma, and on the other was a recent picture of Emma and James building their snowman. So you can carry both your daddies with you always, James explained softly, the one who loved you first and the one who loves you now. Catherine felt tears streaming down her face as Emma threw her arms around James's neck. The generosity of including Richard in such an intimate gift, the understanding that he would never try to replace Emma's father, but simply add to her collection of people who cherished her. It was exactly the kind of wisdom that had made Catherine fall in love with him. I love it, Emma whispered. I love you, Daddy James. I love you too, Princess, more than all the stars in the sky. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep clutching her new locket, Catherine found James on the terrace despite the freezing February air. He stood at the railing, looking out over the city, his breath creating small clouds in the frigid night. Tomorrow's the board meeting, Catherine said, joining him in the cold. I know. They might vote to remove me as CEO. I know. If they do, everything changes. The company, our financial situation, Emma's future. James turned to face her, his expression calm, despite the magnitude of what they were facing. Catherine, do you want to know what I was thinking about out here? She nodded, not trusting her voice. I was thinking about the first time Emma called me Daddy. How terrified I was that you'd fire me, ban me from the building, make sure I never saw her again. He reached for her hands, warming them between his own. And I was thinking about how none of that mattered because for one perfect moment, a little girl felt safe enough to trust me with the most precious title she could give. James, I was thinking about the night you kissed me in the utility room, and how I knew in that moment that my life had just divided into before Catherine and after Catherine. And I was thinking about Emma's locket and how Richard Morrison built something so beautiful, this family, this love that even death couldn't destroy it. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away tears she didn't realize had fallen. Whatever happens tomorrow, we have this. We have Emma's laughter and Sunday morning pancakes and the way she falls asleep between us when she has nightmares. We have each other, Catherine. That's worth more than any board position or stock price or social approval. But if I lose the company, then we'll build something new, together. His smile was soft and sure in the moonlight. I fell in love with Catherine Morrison, not Catherine Morrison-CEO-a-billion-dollar-company. I fell in love with a woman who cries at children's movies and burns toast, and makes the most beautiful little girl in the world feel safe and loved. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. But I'm not scared of losing money or status or other people's approval. I'm only scared of losing you and Emma. And as long as you'll have me, that's never going to happen. Catherine kissed him then, pouring all her love and fear and hope into the connection between them. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, but tonight, standing on her terrace with the man who'd saved her family, she felt ready to fight for the life they'd built together. Let them come, she whispered against his lips. We'll face it together, together, he agreed. And Catherine knew that whatever the board decided, she'd already won the only battle that truly mattered. The Morrison Industries boardroom had hosted countless meetings that shaped the business landscape, but none as personally significant as the one convening on Friday morning at 10 o'clock sharp. Catherine sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, wearing her most authoritative navy suit like armor. With 20 years of corporate achievements and Richard's legacy at her back, across from her, Victoria Ashford shuffled papers with the efficiency of a general preparing for battle. The other board members filed in with expressions ranging from sympathetic to openly hostile, and Catherine felt the weight of their collective judgment settling over the room like smoke. Before we begin, Catherine announced, her voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect in boardrooms from New York to Tokyo. I want everyone to understand exactly what we're discussing today. This isn't a performance review or a financial audit. This is a personal attack disguised as corporate governance. Catherine, Victoria warned, let's keep this professional. Professional. Catherine stood, her hands flat on the table. You want to discuss my personal relationship with a man who has shown nothing but integrity and love toward my family. You want to question my judgment based on his income and social status, rather than his character. Tell me, Victoria, how is that professional? Harold Westbrook leaned forward. Because your choices reflect on this company's reputation. Because shareholders and clients are already asking questions. Because you can't control me the way you controlled Richard. The words hung in the air like an explosion. Victoria's face went white, and several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Richard never needed controlling, Victoria said icily. He understood responsibility. Richard understood love. Catherine shot back. He understood that life is too short and unpredictable to waste on other people's expectations. Do you think you would have wanted me to spend the rest of my life alone, to preserve some outdated notion of social propriety? Before anyone could answer, the conference room door opened. Catherine's assistant appeared, looking apologetic but determined. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here who insists on speaking to the board. He says it's urgent. We're in closed session. Victoria snapped. No interruptions, ma'am. It's James Mitchell, and he has documents he says the board needs to see. Catherine's heart stopped. They'd agreed he would stay away from the building until the meeting was over, to avoid any appearance of impropriety. What could be so important that he'd risk everything by coming here? Send him in, she said. Overruling Victoria's protests, James entered the boardroom, wearing his best dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase Catherine had never seen before. His face was calm, but determined as he nodded respectfully to the assembled board members. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but I have information that's directly relevant to your discussion of Catherine's personal life and my motives for pursuing this relationship. Mr. Mitchell, Victoria began coldly, this is a private board meeting. You have no standing here. Actually, I do. James opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. My name is James Richard Mitchell, and I am the sole heir to the Mitchell construction empire. The room erupted in confused murmurs, but James continued speaking, his voice steady and clear. My grandfather, Robert Mitchell, built Mitchell Construction into one of the largest privately held construction companies in the Midwest before selling it to Davenport Industries in 1995 for $500 million. The sale was structured as a trust that I couldn't access until my 32nd birthday. Catherine stared at him in shock. Everything she believed about his financial situation, everything the board had used to question his motives. Yesterday was my 32nd birthday. James continued, placing documents on the table. As of this morning, I am worth approximately $847 million, making me one of the wealthiest men in Ohio. I've been living on my salary and sending money to my mother, not because I couldn't afford her medical care, but because accessing the trust early would have meant accepting the corporate lifestyle I've spent my entire adult life avoiding. Harold Westbrook grabbed the documents, scanning them frantically. This can't be real. The paperwork is all legitimate, I assure you, verified by Jenkins. Morrison and Associates, I believe you know the firm. James looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. Now, would anyone like to explain to me again how I'm a gold digger pursuing Catherine for her money? Victoria sat in stunned silence, her carefully constructed attack crumbling around her. The question before this board, James continued, is not whether I'm worthy of Catherine Morrison. The question is whether Catherine Morrison is willing to overlook the fact that I've been deceiving her about my financial situation for months because I was terrified she would think I was just another wealthy man pursuing her for her status and connections. He turned to Catherine, and she saw vulnerability in his eyes that had nothing to do with money or status, and everything to do with love. Catherine, I didn't tell you because your wealth was never what attracted me to you. I fell in love with a woman who makes pancakes with her daughter on Sunday mornings, who cries during Emma's school plays, who works 18-hour days not for profit, but to honor her husband's memory. I fell in love with someone who saw past my work clothes to the man underneath. And I was afraid that if you knew about the trust fund, you'd never believe that's what I saw in you two. Catherine felt the world shifting around her as she processed his revelation. James was wealthy enough to buy and sell half the companies represented in this room. All his quiet humility, his gentle insistence that status didn't matter, his comfort with her world despite claiming to be an outsider, it all made sense now. You lied to me, she said quietly. I admitted the truth, he corrected. The same way you omitted telling me that you were falling in love with me, weeks before you admitted it. The same way you didn't mention that you'd been having your security team investigate my background. We both kept secrets, Catherine, because we were both afraid of being hurt again. David Chen cleared his throat. This changes the entire dynamic of the situation, does it? Catherine asked, standing slowly. Does James's net worth somehow make him more worthy of love? Does the fact that he owns assets make him a better stepfather to Emma? Does money validate our relationship in a way that character and devotion couldn't? She looked around the table at the people who had been ready to destroy her personal happiness over questions of social appropriateness. If anything, this proves exactly how little you all understand about love. James Mitchell could have revealed his wealth at any time to gain social acceptance, to make this easier for all of us. Instead, he chose to let you question his motives, to endure your suspicions and insults, because he wanted to be loved for who he is rather than what he owns. Catherine moved to stand beside James, taking his hand in front of the entire board. That, more than any financial disclosure, proves he's exactly the kind of man Richard would have wanted in Emma's life. The kind of man I want in mine. Victoria stood slowly, her expression unreadable. The motion of no confidence is withdrawn. She said quietly, Catherine, your personal life is your own affair. We apologize for overstepping. As the board members filed out, Catherine remained with James in the empty conference room, both of them breathing hard from the emotional intensity of the confrontation. $847 million, she said. Finally, give or take a few million in market fluctuations. He replied sheepishly, you know I don't care about the money, right? You could be worth $8 or $8 billion and it wouldn't change how I feel about you. I know. That's why I love you. Catherine kissed him then, soft and sure and full of promises that had nothing to do with stock portfolios or board meetings or social expectations. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. No more secrets, no more secrets, just us and Emma and whatever comes next. What comes next is a wedding, Catherine said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Because I want the whole world to know that Catherine Morrison chose love over everything else. I want Emma to grow up believing that families are built on devotion, not bank accounts. And I want to spend the rest of my life with the man who taught me that sometimes the most valuable things in life can't be bought. James's smile lit up the boardroom like sunrise. Is that a proposal, Mrs. Don Morrison? That depends. Is that a yes, Mr. Mitchell? That's a forever yes. 6 months later, on a perfect October morning in Central Park, Catherine Morrison married James Mitchell in a ceremony that defied every social convention and honored every rule of the heart. Emma served as their flower girl, walking down the petal-strewn aisle wearing her father's locket and the biggest smile anyone had ever seen. The guest list included construction workers and billionaires, housekeeper Maria and board member Victoria, who had become James's most unlikely champion after he donated $50 million to establish the Richard Morrison Foundation for Childhood Grief Counseling. As they exchanged vows under a canopy of autumn leaves, Catherine felt Richard's presence like a blessing on the gentle breeze. She was no longer the broken widow who had been afraid to live, but a woman who had chosen love over fear, hope over safety, family over fortune. Do you, Catherine, take James to be your husband, to love and cherish, in wealth and in poverty, in joy and in sorrow, for as long as you both shall live? I do, she said, her voice carrying across the gathering like a promise to the universe itself. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Emma cheered louder than anyone, throwing rose petals in the air as her parents kissed beneath the trees, where they built their first snowman. Later, as the reception wound down and Emma fell asleep in James's arms, Catherine looked around at their unconventional family and friends and realized she had everything she'd never dared to dream of: a daughter who felt safe and loved, a husband who chose her heart over her bank account, and a future built on the only foundation that truly mattered. Love had won, in the end, Love always won, for those brave enough to fight for it.